The last 200 feet he took on a run. Then he slowed down and slid around a corner to a window. There was no light inside the stable by that time, but there was someone there, moving or trying to move something heavy. At least that's the way it sounded, he said. He waited a moment, hoping that whoever it was would light a match or use a flash, but nothing of the sort happened, and so he began to work his way toward the door again. He had not gone half the way before a hand caught him by the shoulder, and the same officer who had found him fighting with George had a death grip on his collar and was shoving a revolver into his back. "Now," he said, "come along and no trouble." "Get the hell out of here," Dean yelled, and made a break for the front of the garage. But he was too late. The officer caught him again at the corner of the building and neatly tripped and threw him, and there was a rush out of the garage door and then a complete silence. "Get up, you murdering devil!" yelled the policeman, standing over him. And then he blew his whistle and all at once policemen of all sorts began to converge on the stable and the two of them there. "There were 6 of them there in 3 minutes, he said rather wryly, and when I gave them my name they didn't believe me. Well, they took him into the Lancaster house finally, but they would not let him telephone. That was before Inspector Briggs had been called to our house, and he was still on duty when the call reached him. You have, eh? Where did you find him? Outside the Talbot stable, sir. What was he doing there? What does he say? He says he was after a bird cage, Inspector. A what? A bird cage. Listen, roared the inspector, if you have a bird out there who thinks he's a canary, I want to see him. That's all. So they held him for the inspector to see, putting him into a chair in that library of Mr. Lancaster's while 4 of them stood around the room. They had locked out George Talbot and the nurse from upstairs, who had come running down, and although they had taken his automatic they jumped at him when he reached for his pipe. And that was the situation when a police car screeched to a stop, and 2 men ran for our house while the inspector panted into the Lancasters and banged at the library door. When they opened it he stood staring. Where is he? This is the man, sir. And then Inspector blew up. Why, you blankety-blank sons of jackasses, he shouted. That's Dean. I told you he was on this case. Is this a joke, or what the hell do you think you're doing? When, leaving an inspector exhausted from sheer flow of vocabulary, The four of them accompanied Herbert Dean back to the stable. They found the stable closed and the bird cage gone. Some time later we were to learn that it had been found lying in their backyard by a family on Euclid Street, and by them carefully washed and refurnished with a new canary. But when that discovery was made known, it no longer mattered. He told me a considerable amount that morning, while Mother slept and I ate the light breakfast I was permitted, although I know now that he told me only what he wanted me to know. Thus, in spite of the Crescent's critical attitude toward them, the police were busy with the infinitely patient detail which only they could cover. They were handicapped, of course, by the very prominence and isolation of the Crescent. There was no chance to introduce the usual operatives to watch us. No window cleaners could be brought in. The Crescent washes its own windows and polishes them until they shine. No detectives driving taxi cabs could sit at our curbstones, eyeing all who came and went. No house painters or roofers could work on adjacent buildings while watching us, and no agents or canvassers could pass our rightly locked front doors. True, at noon on Monday an individual in the outfit of a city park employee had, for the first time in history, appeared with the proper tools in no man's land, and for the next 3 days raked, cut and burned while keeping a sharp watch on our comings and goings. And after Monday Daniels, our street cleaner, was superseded by a gimlet-eyed gentleman with a walrus mustache which Helen Wellington later claimed to have seen him drop and pick up hastily one day. But otherwise our policemen were frankly policemen. They came and went, or stood guard at night, uncamouflaged and known to most of us. Their inquiries, however, had brought only negative results. Sunday had been a lost day, but in 3 days since Mrs. Lancaster's murder they had located neither the source of the lead weights in the chest nor the hiding place of the gold. It looked as though the weights had been bought a box at a time, the usual box containing only 2 pounds, and thus the process necessarily continued over a long time. Inquiry among the reputable locksmiths all over the city had discovered no one of them who had made a duplicate of the key to the chest, and although some of the banks were able to give the names of people who were hoarding gold in safe deposit boxes, in every case apparently their identity was known, and in most cases they were regular customers of the bank. But Herbert did not tell me of the intensive examination of Mrs. Lancaster's bedroom, made the night before by the inspector and himself after the birdcage incident. Or of the hour just at dawn when he himself had sat down by one of Daniel's old fires in no man's land and had patiently, inch by inch, gone over the ashes. It was 2 weeks before he told me all this, and then only as a part of the summary of the case. The inspector needed help by that time, he said, grinning reminiscently. He knew me, of course, but this was a big case and he wanted it himself. Not only that. He was so sure of Jim at first that he couldn't see anything else, and I was Jim's man. That galled him, and he held out on me.